If you look at a map of Russia, one thing stands out, and that is its sheer size. It is the largest country in the world, spanning 11 time zones and 2 continents. From the ice-covered Arctic in the north to the deserts of Kazakhstan, and from the Baltic Sea in the west to the Pacific Ocean in the east, it is so large that it dominates the world map. But the most interesting thing is that 80% of Russia's population lives on only 20% of the area, and the rest of the country is almost empty. But why is this? Why does such a powerful country have so much empty land? And why is some parts of Russia easy to live in and the rest so difficult? To understand this, we have to understand the geography, history and politics of Russia, because there are many stories behind this strange population pattern of Russia. Let's start with the basics. If you divide Russia into 2 parts, European Russia and Asian Russia, you will see a very strange thing. European Russia is spread over only 23% of the area, but 80% of Russia's population lives here, while Asian Russia, also called Siberia or Far East Russia, is spread over 75% of the area and is mostly empty. The capital of Russia, Moscow, is also in European Russia, as is St. Petersburg, which is the cultural hub of Russia. Most of Russia's railroad network, industries and political institutions are also on this western side. But why didn't Russia settle on the eastern side? To understand this, we have to go back centuries. In the beginning, Russia was not as big as it is today. At that time, there were small Slavic communities in the area, which is today called West Russia and Ugric. These communities were near rivers and the land was fertile and the weather was great, but on the other side of the Ural mountain range, things were very different. When the Russian Empire began to expand, it tried to settle people on the eastern side, but it was very difficult to live there because Siberia is famous for its extremely cold weather. There is only snow here. Now, like in Europe, cities were easily built around rivers. It was difficult to do so in Siberia because it was very cold and there was nothing to grow. But then things started to change during the Soviet era. When the Soviet Union came to power in the early 20th century, its leaders made a plan for development and population expansion on the eastern side, especially in Siberia and the far east of Russia. But this time, instead of asking the people's will, the government started sending them there by force. During the 1920s to 1950s, millions of people were sent to the eastern side. Some of them were political people who were accused of speaking against the government, and some were simple citizens who were sent there for labor, and some people were sent to make a Goal X, which were prison camps located in extremely cold areas. Life in these camps was very hard. People were forced to work in mines, forests and construction projects in the bitter cold and were given little food and a place to live. At the same time, the Soviet Union started building new cities and industrial centers on the east side, and these centers were close to oil fields, coal mines and military bases. The aim was to use the resources of Siberia for the Soviet economy and to strengthen the Soviet Union's control over it. The largest project of this era was the Trans-Siberian Railway Network, which was completed in 1916, and this track was laid from Moscow in the west to a port city like Vladivostok, which is right next to the Pacific Ocean. It is the longest railway line in the world, with a length of it is more than 9,000 kilometers long, and its aim is to connect the eastern regions of Russia with the western areas. The biggest and most national reason for this was that the western part of Russia is very good to live in. European Russia has always been suitable for living. The weather here is pleasant, the land is fertile and flat, which makes construction easy here. In this European part of Russia, the land of the Black Earth Belt region in particular is the most fertile in the world. This fertile belt extends to areas like Kursk, Voronezh and Belgorod and is considered the best for wheat, barley and sunflower crops, and that is why 70% of Russia's grain is produced in this Black Earth region. Similarly, the major rivers here, such as the Volga, which is the longest river in Europe, and the Nisa, have both been historically used for trade. The Volga is connected to more than 100 Russian cities, including Kazan, Nizhny Novgorod, and Volgograd, and it finally flows into the Caspian Sea. This area, which is excellent in agriculture and transport, is also close to Europe, which gives it access to its trade culture and modern infrastructure. Russia's two most important cities, Moscow and St. Petersburg, are both on the western side, and both of them have about 20 million people. These cities have good roads, a healthcare system, job opportunities, and high-quality education. Most of Russia's big businessmen and government offices are also here, which is why all the professionals and students of Russia come here. Even during the Soviet Union, the western site was preferred. The Russian elite, which included government officers and intellectuals, lived in Moscow and St. Petersburg. All the Soviet Union's investments were in these cities. And this pattern is still there today, like even today the average salary in Moscow is double the national average salary of the region. That's why you will see a layer divide in Russia today. The western area is the economic and political center, while Siberia and the Far East are far behind. And the reason for this is that it is very difficult to live on the eastern side. Siberia is known for its harshest weather. For example, if you look at Yakutia, which is the coldest city in the world, the temperature there goes below -60 degrees Celsius. The rivers freeze and the summers are very short. Mosquitoes also make life miserable. There are very few cities here and there is a lot of distance between them. There are forests, mountains, and frozen ground. There are no roads or infrastructure, and there is no special agriculture here. But despite this emptiness, Siberia is rich in natural resources. This region has the largest oil and gas reserves in Russia, which is why it is considered one of the most resource-rich areas in the world. According to official estimates, 80% of Russia's natural gas and 70% of oil comes from Siberia. In addition, a large part of the gas that Europe gets comes from Siberia. Similarly, Siberia also has another natural wonder, and that is Lake Baikal. This is not an ordinary lake, but it is the deepest lake in the world, with a depth of up to 1,600 meters. And what is even more interesting is that 20% of the world's fresh water supply is here. Similarly, Russia's 40% of the world's coal reserves are also in Siberia, and there are also large gold and diamond mines here. For example, the Sukhoi gold deposit in Irkutsk is one of the largest untapped gold reserves on Earth, containing 450 tons of gold. The region is also rich in uranium reserves, making Russia the fifth largest uranium producer in the world. But there is a big problem here that extracting these resources from the ground is very expensive. Now, like the Arctic area, it is very cold here and there is so much snow that it is difficult to reach the ground. And then there are no roads here, which is why it is also very difficult to deliver drilling equipment here. That is why extracting oil from here is a much more expensive and difficult task than extracting oil from countries like the Middle East or America. Due to such tough conditions, the people who live in the Siberian area are mostly those who have jobs in the oil and gas or mining industry. Life is very difficult here because the cities are very far away and then there are forests in the middle. There is snow and the weather is also very cold. That is why when the job ends, people leave this area, and that is why you will also see many ghost towns in Siberia. The Russian government has tried a lot to solve this problem. They have tried to give people free land, low taxes, and even money so that they can go to the eastern side. But most people refuse. They do, and the reason is simple: it is very cold here, cities are far away, and basic necessities such as schools, hospitals, and even internet are difficult to find. Another reason for this strange population pattern is that Russia has limited access to warm seas, and this has always been a major problem for its economy, trade, and military. Much of Russia's coastline is either frozen all year round or far removed from global shipping routes. There is an Arctic Ocean in the north of Russia, but this sea remains frozen for 9 months of the year, which makes trade and shipping impossible here. Due to climate change, some Arctic sea lanes have been opened. But still, passing through here by ships is a dangerous and expensive task. The eastern part of Russia touches the Pacific Ocean and there is also an important port city like Vladivostok, but the real problem is the distance. Vladivostok is 9,000 kilometers away from Moscow and is on the other side of Siberia. Now Vladivostok is a warm water port, but even here in winter the water often freezes and then it can only be passed through icebreaker ships. Therefore, this port is important, but Russia does not rely on it much. Russia has the strongest sea access in the Black Sea through the Strait of Svetlogorsk, but here too there is a problem. To reach the Mediterranean Sea, Russian ships have to pass through the Bosphorus and the Dardanelles Strait. Both of these straits are under the control of Turkey, which is a NATO country. In the event of a war with NATO, Turkey can block these choke points, which will cut off its access to the Atlantic Ocean and global trade routes. Due to access to this warm water, most of Russia's population, infrastructure, and industry are in these areas, but this empty land of Russia is also its biggest weapon. Eastern Russia seems to be a weakness because there is such a small population here. But this empty land gives Russia a huge military advantage. This large empty land becomes a buffer zone for Russia because if an enemy tries to attack from the eastern side, it will have to pass through forests, rivers, and mountains spread over several hundred kilometers and first go somewhere and then reach the big cities of Russia. In this way, Russia gets time to plan a good response to any attack, and this is not just a theory. This has already happened in history during World War II. The Germans attacked the Soviet Union from the western side. As the German army advanced, the Soviet army desperately retreated and went so far inland that the supply line of the German army began to be affected. It was very cold up there, so the German soldiers began to get tired. In such a situation, the Soviet soldiers came together and attacked from all sides and pushed Germany back. This strategy can still be used today because the geography of Russia is very dangerous for any army coming from outside. Similarly, during the Cold War, most of the military bases and radar stations of the Soviet Union were in Siberia. These bases were deliberately built here so that their location would be difficult to trace. And not only that, bomber jets and nuclear weapons were also hidden in Siberia so that no one could reach there. So eastern Russia looks empty, but this emptiness gives Russia room to breathe, gives it time to defend, and now also gives it space to hide its most powerful weapons. So 80%, why do the Russian only live in 20% of the area? But this empty space is not only a problem, but also a hidden strength of the region because it not only protects the region but also gives it the resources that make it a world superpower. Today, technology and transport have improved. The flight from Moscow to Vladivostok takes only 8 hours. Internet connections are spread throughout the country. But the basics of daily life do not change. In European Russia, cities are close together. Trains are fast, shops are full, and schools, hospitals, roads are all better. In Eastern Russia, there are facilities in large cities like Novosibirsk and Ekaterinburg, but as you go a little further east, the situation worsens. Many young people come from the eastern side for studies or jobs, and then never return. There are also fewer beds on this eastern side and more people are born, due to which while the population of the western side is increasing, the eastern side is becoming more empty, despite the fact that this area is rich in resources. If Russia is a giant, it is a giant that stands on one leg. All its power and development is on the western side, while the future of the eastern side is embedded. If you liked the video, then like it and subscribe to the channel. Take care of yourself in the next video. God bless.